Good evening and welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service through a unique partnership with Alaska Public Media. It is Tuesday, June 28, 2022. We're not too far off from the long 4th of July holiday weekend. Let's go right into the headlines. Across the state here this morning, there were some surprise thunderstorms. They weren't really in the forecast. It was a tricky situation, but nevertheless, the southern panhandle saw some thunder and lightning there at Wrangell and around Ketchikan. Those have since dissipated, and again, not too common of an occurrence. Also, there were some areas of dense fog in the panhandle, and I'll talk more about that coming up because there are also some other dense fog advisories for some of those areas again tonight into early Wednesday morning. Lingering smoke and poor air quality continues to be a problem across the interior. We'll show you that in a moment. And then the heat's going to build. We're looking at holiday heat for the weekend, and definitely it's going to be expanding northward up to the Brooks Range and North Slope. It'll remain over the east and then redeveloping over the southeast later this weekend and early next week, just in time for the 4th of July. As a result, though, the already very high to extreme fire dangers in areas will be ever increasing as the fuels, things that can burn, such as the grasses as well as the trees, tundra, they're at record dry levels. Be extremely careful. It's best to refrain from using any sort of fire if you're going to be doing any camping, outdoor recreating, unless it's in a very contained space, in a camper or something. Be very careful also. Fireworks, no, don't even consider that because it's really bad out there. Eagle had the state's high temperature yesterday at 86 degrees. Today, the smoke and haze is keeping the temperature down a bit. This was a 2 o'clock temperature at 75, but it will also the smoke tends to suppress thunderstorm development. Now look there in the other image, Gulkana, we have building cumulus clouds there as we look north toward the Alaska Range. Those will develop into a few showers and isolated thunderstorms, temperature approaching 80 in the early mid-afternoon. And then Skagway has temperatures at the water there, 78, but surrounding areas, Haines is well into the 80s. There could even be an isolated 90-degree reading in the northern panhandle this afternoon. Klawak is cooler with mostly cloudy skies and 65 degrees. And here is a time-lapse image from the Fairbanks area at the Alaska Climate Research Center. It's a panoramic time-lapse showing, look at the smoke and haze that comes and goes there. You can really see the impacts. At times the visibilities get down, probably down near a mile or so. Very poor air quality, not good for anyone that has respiratory issues. And looking at the hazards weather map, we have the dense smoke advisory in effect through early Wednesday afternoon there in the central areas north of the Alaska Range, including Tanana and the Fairbanks areas. Further south and east, dense fog advisories for later tonight and early Wednesday morning, especially the outer areas of the northern and southern panhandles. So it's you're going to see a redevelopment of some lower marine layer clouds and fog as we go through tonight in parts of the panhandle. Quick want to show you active fires across the state. According to the latest from the Alaska Interagency Coordination Center, 144 active fires. And the other number down the lower right, we have burned nearly 1.5 million acres so far this fire season. It is off to a very robust early start, and so again, as conditions further dry through the holiday weekend, fire danger is going to be climbing, and we expect these fuel levels are at record dry levels. Also with the smoke is going to move back into south central areas overnight and tomorrow, and the southern interior will remain very smoky here going into the holiday weekend. There are as of today, Tuesday, 750 firefighters deployed on 15 staffed fires of 144 that are currently been measured and are occurring in the state. And this number will be going up, the number of firefighters that need to be deployed. The low pressure in the Bering Sea will swing some moisture up along the west and southwest coast. It'll make a little bit of inland progress there, but not enough to produce significant rains, wet conditions to alleviate the long-term dry conditions. And fire danger is highest there through the interior, central eastern interior, extreme pockets there, especially Yukon Flats. Also very high fire danger to extreme in areas of the Mat-Su Valley and also the western Kenai. Satellite imagery is showing that we have, if you look to the right side, Ketchikan area, you'll see kind of enhanced white clouds this morning. Those were those thunderstorms up toward Wrangell. Those have since dissipated. The ridge of high pressure remains in place from the surface to the mid and upper atmosphere through the south central areas. So still seeing a fair amount of sun and warm temperatures. Low pressure out there north of the western and central Aleutians. Has a occluded front working its way eastward with a weak ridge of high pressure all the way hanging out there, the lower Yukon Delta. And as we go through tonight into early Wednesday morning, the low is sitting out there out through the central Bering, the occluded front weakening as it comes east. We continue to see areas of fog, especially along coastal areas of the Panhandle, and the smoke lagging and lingering there through the interior. And some of that smoke will be moving south eastward into south central areas. Wednesday afternoon, scattered thunderstorms possible along the coastal mountains there, the inner Panhandle on up in the northern Gulf Coast and southeast interior. And on Thursday, not much change. Again, scattered showers and storms possible along the Alaska Range, including the areas north up through the 40-mile Gold Country in the middle upper Tanana Valley, as well as Talkeetna Mountains, Copper River Basin. And we see that low pressure Thursday kind of reconsolidating, organizing with rain off of the southwest coast. It's going to make a run at the west side of the state, but that will be about as far east as it gets. There's still no relief for the extreme dry conditions across central and eastern parts of the mainland. Looking at temperatures, mild, lows generally in the 50s tonight. For Wednesday afternoon, it'll be cooler in the Panhandle. 80s should give way to more 70s. Could be an isolated 80 there. 80 possible Glen Ellen on over toward Talkeetna and McGrath. And then lows again generally in the 50s for Thursday morning. And as we go through Thursday afternoon, we anticipate temperatures in the Panhandle to be a bit cooler. But as I said, they're going to be coming back up there over the course of the latter half of 4th of July weekend as the ridge of high pressure rebuilds. Back there, though, further west, McGrath could be up to about 83 here Thursday afternoon because the heat's going to rebuild, especially across the central and northern interior. Wednesday morning lows will be generally above 50 along the Yukon River, 40s elsewhere. And then on Wednesday, we see temperatures generally in the 80s there, Fairbanks, Fort Yukon. The typical warm spots, Eagle and Northway. Readings, generally in the 50s along the Arctic coast. A little cooler there as you get out there toward Wales, only 44 in the Bering Strait. And lows Thursday morning, again, generally 40-ish there across the Arctic coast and generally above 50 through the Yukon Valley. And the heat will begin to reestablish itself Thursday and the Friday there in the central interior before building northward on Friday. So very warm temperatures. It's going to continue to dry out things. Looking at the southwest interior, lows generally in the lower 50s or so. Coastal areas still generally in the 40s is what we would expect. High temperatures Wednesday afternoon. McGrath could be up near 80-ish, but areas like, say Bethel, be up around or a bit above 70, as well as King Salmon. Thursday morning lows generally in the 50s as we go up the Yukon and Kuskokwim River basins, and then areas along the Alaska Peninsula and Aleutian should be in the mid and upper 40s, and then a little more heat up there Thursday afternoon. We could see some temperatures and on over toward Ruby, and those places there could be in the upper 70s, certainly 80 to lower 80s. And a quick check at the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook for July 4th through the 8th. Above to much above normal temperatures will continue over the eastern mainland through the southeast into the Panhandle. Centered there on Prince William Sound. A little cooler conditions there expected there in the west, especially the southwest lower YK deltas, including Bethel. And then precipitation may average a little above normal from areas north of Anchorage and up through the Yukon Valley and the Brooks Range. And then Little drier conditions below normal precipitation anticipated across most of the Panhandle.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Let's take a look now at your aviation weather. And if you have a flight planned through this midweek, we're continuing to see areas of smoke associated with some nearly 150 wildfires across the state. Areas of smoke could be rather dense, especially in the vicinity of active fires. It's going to reduce visibility, especially that slantwise visibility looking out the window. So keep that in mind as you fly, even though conditions may be VFR. And we have IFR conditions up there through the southern Panhandle and out over the Gulf, and then along coastal areas of the west and north, as well as out across the Bering. And on Wednesday afternoon, we anticipate thunderstorms to redevelop there along and south of the Alaska Range, including the Talkeetna Mountains and the upper Copper River Basin, as well as across areas of the far eastern interior, including the upper Tanana Valley's 40-mile gold country. So again, convection will be an issue here, not just Wednesday afternoon, but for the rest of the week into this upcoming holiday weekend. Smoke continues to be an issue, especially north and west of the Alaska Range across the interior. Look for IFR conditions expanding there through the Panhandle. Again, a marine layer and some areas of fog could form to really reduce visibility. And there along southwestern coast, simply because we have the colder waters there of the Bering Sea. And then Thursday afternoon, thunderstorms redevelop along the Alaska Range, same places, Talkeetna Mountains, Copper River Basin, on up there through the Tanana Valley, with smoke persisting throughout the interior. Look for generally MVFR conditions there across much of the Panhandle, inner channels at least, and outer coast there of the Panhandle, Northern Gulf, IFR. Anaktuvik Pass will be MVFR, becoming VFR there during the afternoon on Wednesday. Same thing for Adigant Pass. Look for MVFR becoming VFR, and any of these areas could be impacted by at least some smoky haze. Lake Clark and Merrill will see VFR conditions, but again, smoke and haze is not out of the question, just given the nature and the broad coverage of the smoke and haze in varying thicknesses. Rainy Pass will see VFR conditions. Windy, also VFR, but a thunderstorm could pop up in vicinity for the afternoon or evening. Isabel Pass, also a vicinity type thunderstorm possible with VFR conditions prevailing. And also, again, further east there along the Alaska Range and south through the Copper River Basin, we are looking for VFR conditions, but thunderstorms will be possible. And Tanita Pass could see a thunderstorm pop up in vicinity Wednesday afternoon or evening with VFR conditions. Further south and west there, Portage, VFR conditions. Should rain throughout the day. And then for the far northern Panhandle, we are anticipating VFR conditions to give way to IFR conditions if indeed some lower cloud cover works its way inland further. Freezing levels are highest over northwest Canada, the Yukon Territory, in excess of 10,000 feet, as well as parts of the mainland there and through the southwest interior. Further west, low pressure that's located north of the central Aleutians there in the lower Bering. We see freezing levels as low as 6,000 feet aloft, associated with that colder pool of air aloft. There could be some icing between 8 and 14,000 feet there over the lower and central Bering Sea. And another batch of precipitation coming up with that system could create areas of some icing 12,000 to a flight level of 20,000 feet along and just south of the central Aleutians. The upper level jet stream winds, high pressure ridge still sitting there, northern Gulf, southern part of the state extending northwestward. Low pressure out over the Bering, and as we bring it down to 9,000 feet, a broad belt of 40 to near 50 knot winds all the way from just west of St. Lawrence down across into the central and eastern Aleutians. And as we look at 3,000 foot winds, there are winds of 40 to 50 knots along the northwest coast, point lay on up toward Utqiagvik, and there could be turbulence there in the northwest, as well as a broad belt of winds 40 to 45 knots from just south and southwest of St. Lawrence, all the way down through St. Paul, St. George, and into the central eastern Aleutians. And this will translate to the possibility of some turbulence. Considerable moderate turbulence could occur Western Alaska Range and along areas of the northwest coast between the surface and 5,000 feet, and then further south and west with a low that's out over the lower Bering. We expect some turbulence surface to 4,000 feet in the central and starting to move into the eastern Aleutian. So that wraps up your aviation weather. If you are thinking about heading out on a flight, check the latest conditions and forecast. And I wish you a safe flight if you get off the ground.
On March 11, 2011, a powerful tsunami hit Japan, destroying cities and villages. As the water receded back into the ocean, it pulled what remained of buildings, cars, boats, and homes along with it. Scrap metals, plastics, and objects of all shapes and sizes either sank near the shore or floated away. In the days that followed, large masses of floating debris could easily be seen by satellite imagery and aerial photos. In the wake of this disaster, NOAA is assessing the potential impact that the debris may have on U.S. shores. So, where will this debris go, and when will it get there? To help answer those questions, scientists are using computer models to estimate the debris' path, using its starting location in the tsunami zone and historical weather and ocean conditions. The findings are that some debris could pass near or wash ashore in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands as early as this winter. Debris may also approach the west coast of the United States in 2013 and potentially circle back to the main Hawaiian Islands in 2014. But scientists caution that there are limitations to what computer models can tell us, now that the debris has moved out of satellite view, and with currents and winds in the Pacific constantly changing, there is no guarantee that the debris will stay on the predicted path. Items will sink along the way, or break up and disperse in many directions. Despite these unknowns, NOAA and its partners are collecting data, assessing possible impacts, and making preparations in case debris does wash ashore. The 2011 tsunami in Japan reminds us that the devastation that happens on land can also become a marine debris issue at sea.
Imagine all of this underwater. In a major tsunami, it could happen. In this part of Washington state, it's happened before, hundreds of years ago. Sometime in the future, it will likely happen again. But we can be ready. If a tsunami strikes, this school will provide a place for people to ride it out above the waves.
We're in Westport, Washington, and right behind me is the very first tsunami vertical evacuation center in the United States.
This is an emergency. Please walk to the nearest exit, go to the stair tower, and proceed up the stairs.
Tsunamis are a potential hazard for low-lying coastal areas. That's why many coastal communities have plans in place to get people to safety, high ground or inland, where they can be beyond the reach of a tsunami. Often there are signs showing where to go and where to gather. Most tsunamis are caused by underwater earthquakes along subduction zones, where two of Earth's plates collide and one is forced under the other. Westport and other Pacific Northwest coastal communities are especially at risk because one of these zones lies just offshore. It's called the Cascadia Subduction Zone. An earthquake here caused a tsunami in 1700 that flooded shores as far away as Japan. Experts say it's just a matter of time before it happens again. Since the subduction zone is so close, a tsunami like the one in 1700 could strike before people in some low-lying areas could get to high ground or inland. And Westport doesn't have a lot of high ground or easy routes inland.
If we get an earthquake or a tsunami, we're going to get a lot of water in the area really quickly, and we needed a place to go. So our community built this brand new school, and above our gym and cafeteria, we have a roof, and so the idea is that we'll get all of our students up, and anybody from the community who needs to get up, they can get up there as well.
Ocosta Elementary School might seem like a normal school, but look more closely. It's engineered to withstand monster waves. Tsunami vertical evacuation shelters must be able to resist the powerful forces that a tsunami brings. Hydrodynamic, buoyant, hydrostatic, and debris impact forces and strong currents. They're also designed to help people get to safety quickly.
There are 4 big staircases on each corner of the building, and each one of those staircases is 8 feet wide, and we can get the whole school evacuated in about 4.5 minutes.
Everybody should be at a 0.
On the roof of the building, there is water and food and buckets and shelters and tarps and blankets and different things so that we can be up there for 2, 3, maybe 4 days while we wait for rescue.
You can go to the top and you know you'll be safe. It feels really nice to have a special building because you feel protected.
This community decided that a tsunami evacuation center was important because they didn't have anywhere to go, and they decided to use their money to build the building. The additional cost is anywhere between 10 and 20% of the actual building cost itself, and that's really a sound investment for a lot of protection. You may be there a while, but you're safe and you're secure, and that's the most important thing.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back, and let's start with the sea ice edge. The lower Chukchi Sea through the Bering Strait is ice-free, and we're seeing the ice now beginning to break free there along the northern Arctic coast. You can see things opening up pretty well there along the Mackenzie River mouth there in northwest Canada. And then across areas west of Katovik, we expect this to be expanding. Even warmer temperatures are on the way coming up through the North Slope and along the Arctic coast. So we expect further melting, and the shore-fast ice should be giving way here over the next several days in some areas. For the Panhandle, winds will generally be out of the south at 10 to 15 knots for the inner channels, waves running a few feet. There could be areas of dense fog. Some of the outer coastal areas on Wednesday morning, winds otherwise out of the west-northwest 15 to 20 knots there in through the Gulf, with waves running 6-7 feet, maybe 8, as high as 8 feet off of Craig. And then on Thursday, the inner channel winds will generally have some sort of westerly or southerly component, 10 knots to as high as 20 knots, southerly winds there to 20 knots, and Lynn Canal with waves maybe as high as 3-4 feet. For the outer coast, winds will be northwesterly, 10 to 15 knots, with waves generally 4 to 5 feet. For the northwestern Gulf, Prince William Sound variable winds 10 knots with waves a couple of feet. And as we go through the off the Kenai, winds will be southwesterly 25 knots with waves of maybe 6 feet, and then up through the entrance of Cook Inlet, 20 knot southwest winds, 5-foot waves, and then winds becoming more variable the further north you go up as you get up toward Anchorage, including Turnagain Arm there. Variable winds 10 knots, waves a couple of feet. Widespread variable winds on Thursday across Prince William Sound, the northwestern Gulf Coast areas, and waves only a couple few feet there. Still easterly winds, though, to 25 knots there at the entrance of Cook Inlet, and turning more south to southwesterly as you get up toward Anchorage. And then finally on Wednesday, going and looking at Kodiak Island, winds southwest 20-25 knots, waves 5 to 6 feet. Winds are going to become more south and then southeasterly across the lower portion, southern portion of the Alaska Peninsula, with waves 5 feet on the North Pacific side, 3 feet on the Bering side. On Thursday, frontal system associated with a low out in the Bering will turn winds across much of the area from the south-southeast. Southerly winds about 20 knots in the vicinity of Kodiak Island, and then increasing southeasterly winds to 30 knots, Bristol Bay down through Cold Bay and off of Sand Point. Waves could be as high as 10 feet off of Sand Point. Across the Aleutians, the eastern and central Aleutians will generally have southerly winds 20 to 25 knots, waves running 6-7 feet on the North Pacific side, 4 to 6 feet on the Bering side. And Thursday, we could see 35-knot gales there near north of Dutch Harbor, with waves perhaps as high as 8-9 feet. And winds, those southerly winds, though, are going to be turning more westerly once you get toward Atka, and then northwesterly west of Adak through Kiska. And waves that way generally running around 4 or 5 feet. For the southwest coast, winds will be southeasterly 15 to 20 knots, waves generally running anywhere from about 5 to 7 feet there in the vicinity of St. Paul and St. Matthew. And then Thursday's winds will be brisker. We could see 30 isolated 35-knot gales from the southeast, especially west and southwest of Nunavik Island. Waves as high as 10 feet or so there. Easterly winds out of Norton Sound, 15 knots, and waves 3 feet. Then finally along the Arctic region, we are anticipating winds south 25 to 30 knots through the Bering Strait and lower Chukchi Sea, turning southwesterly to 30 knots there, Point Lay up to Utqiagvik, and then generally southerly winds there along the Arctic coast, 15-20 knots. This is pulling in some warmer air that's going to be downsloping there off the Brooks Range and bringing some warmer temperatures. And on Thursday, winds along the Arctic coast should generally be out of the southwest, 15 to 20 knots, and increasing to 25 knots as you get down toward Point Lay. And certainly southerly winds off of Cape Lisburne and Point Hope to 25 knots, with waves in the Chukchi Sea 4 to 6 feet. Quick check of the weather maps during the day Wednesday. There's that low in the central lower Bering. Ridge of high pressure building up from the North Pacific into the Gulf, southwest side of the state. That ridge will further flex its muscle on up into the Gulf here as we go through Thursday, and certainly over the course of the holiday weekend. That's going to allow the heat to build back northward across the interior. So that wraps up the show for this Tuesday evening. Thank you for watching, and have a good rest of this week.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.